Hi, my name's Heather Bradley with Bristol Trauma Therapy.co.uk, and this video is solely about my own journey. So I have overcome my own childhood sexual abuse and later traumas as well. And so this video is me going into how I was personally affected by what I'd been through and how I came out of the other side of it. Okay, so I haven't prepared anything for this video. I've got no notes. I've got no structure, because I thought it best just to turn on the camera and sit here and talk to you and just speak from the heart, really. Because I'm sure that if you're here on my website or if you stumbled across this video on YouTube, then perhaps it relates to things that you're going through too. So I'd rather talk to you just human to human. So I have experienced childhood sexual abuse, like I say, at a young age, and the effect that that had on me was utterly devastating. I had PTSD badly, got complex PTSD. I had depression, I had anxiety, I had flashbacks, night terrors, insomnia. I was addicted to self-harm for a long time. I've had issues with drink and drugs. I've had suicide attempts. I've had, I think one of the biggest ways it affected me was with intimacy problems and sexual dysfunction. So I had a condition called vaginismus, which you may have heard of, you may have experienced yourself. I had primary vaginismus, where my vagina just literally would not open. It was clamped shut because of the trauma that it had experienced before, and it said, no way am I ever having anything inside me again. And living with that was indescribably hard, because it's something that you don't want to tell anyone. I felt embarrassed about it. I felt like I wasn't a woman. I felt like I was broken. And I found myself comparing myself to other people who worked properly, who were proper women. I thought that my boyfriend should be with them, not me. Played into all of my feelings about feeling worthless and unlovable and not good enough. And so I really know firsthand how much being sexually abused or having any kind of severe trauma in your life it permeates every part of your life, and it's so hard to tell people that. It's so hard to get across to people. It's like so much more than just I'm having a bad day, And I found this. So my journey really started with this when I was 16. I had just turned 16 and just gone to college, and I got my first proper boyfriend. And we fell quite deeply in love quite quickly. And it was such a magical time in some ways, but getting into a relationship with somebody brought up so much of my stuff that I didn't really even know that I had buried there. And I mean, trust issues, intimacy issues. But what I really remember is this first time that we tried to have sex. And obviously, like, when we have these issues, when we've gone through the things that we've gone through with these traumas, we're still human beings. We still have like desires and needs and passion. And I wanted to have sex with my partner. I did. And so I remember that during this first time, we've kind of been kissing and cuddling on the bed and stuff. And it had been a few months since we got together. And I remember he moved his hand down to my jeans to unbutton my jeans, and in that moment when he unbuttoned my jeans, something happened in me where I just felt myself disappear. I was gone. I now know that to be dissociation, but at the time I didn't know that. I just felt like I'm not here. It was like my body had gone rigid and paralyzed, but I just had checked out. And I've since had a lot of experiences where I've physically left my body and been on the ceiling and looked down, but this wasn't like that. This was just like a numbing out. It was like, I am not here, like being behind glass or something like that. And he didn't really realize. So then I think then it was the zip or some more buttons. I don't fully remember, but I do remember when he put his hand inside, it was like this wave of total terror and fear came over me, and I wasn't expecting to feel that. The whole thing was confusing, and it was shocking and disappointing and really, really, really scary, because I felt terrified with this person who I loved and I trusted. And so in that moment when his hands were on me, I think at that point they were still over underwear, but whoa, it was so close to me. I wasn't in control, and I started shaking violently, crying, sobbing. My heart was hammering. I was having a PTSD response, but I didn't know that I didn't know that that's what that was. I didn't know that I had been triggered. All I know is that I just felt awful in that moment. So of course we stopped, and he was amazing, and he was like, oh, maybe it's too soon, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to pressure you, which he didn't at all, by the way. There had been no pressure. And it was scary for both of us, because neither of us knew what on earth was going on. And perhaps if you're watching this video, you can relate to something like that, perhaps to that severity, perhaps not. But if we've had any kind of sexual abuse in our lives, then it does have a knock-on effect to our sexual relationships and our intimacy, our trust, and our relationship with ourselves and our own body as well. And actually, after that, things got bad, because I would just become triggered by everything. It's like it had unlocked something inside me, and all of these deeper things were rushing to the surface that felt so sinister and so dark. And I was aware there was something that I was trying desperately not to think about. And I started putting on this persona. People even used to call me hippie happy Heather in college. I used to wear like rainbow clothes and a big rainbow hat and be like, I must be happy, because nobody can see how I am falling apart underneath it all. And I think what was scary about it was I felt so out of control. I remember one time, for example, I think I was still 16 at this point. I was walking through Broadmead, which is Bristol city centre. I was walking through and I saw a billboard with an advert with a lady in, it was either a bikini or lingerie. I don't remember. I just remember that it was a half-naked woman. And just glancing at that and seeing it in my peripheral vision, I totally numbed out again. I dissociated, and my body collapsed down onto the floor and was crying and shaking and having a full-on PTSD response. And I don't think I even grasped like what had happened, that, oh, it was because I saw that I'm feeling this way, because it's total like fight or flight. You're just in terror at that point. And it was a trigger, a flashback that took me back into feeling all of those powerless feelings that I did when I was a child. But at this point, when I'm 16 and walking down the street with my boyfriend, I didn't realize that that's what was happening. I didn't know all the things I know now as a therapist. And things like that used to happen a lot. And so I was really feeling like I'm not a woman, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me. So you have like the vaginismus side and the sexual side, but in addition to that, I also had this growing feeling, and it was coming into my dreams by this point as well, that dreaming of being like held down, being raped, being in situations that I couldn't get out of, and feeling out of control. And so I started self-harming, and know, I think I did this partly in a way to gain some control back, because it's like everything was just spiraling. I felt like I didn't have control over anything in my life at this point, and somehow cutting it was like it was something that I could do. And I found myself doing it a lot, like several times a day. But I think the biggest thing that it gave me was it gave me this like emotional release, because I could feel all of these emotions like building up like a pressure cooker, and it had nowhere to go. They had nowhere to go. I didn't understand any of them. I didn't understand what they were. I couldn't talk to anybody. I felt like I was just totally alone with all of this, and I felt like it was my duty and responsibility to like fix myself and sort myself out. And so for me, when it got to that pressure point and I would cut, I'd breathe, I'd release, and it gave me that real feeling of like, oh, okay, the pressure's been released, I'm okay, I can focus for a minute, I can decide what I'm going to do next. But of course it wasn't an answer. I just became more and more addicted to that. I became more addicted to the feeling of the release, the rush of the adrenaline and the hormones. And of course then I found myself having to like wear long sleeve tops all the time, and you know, and they were itchy and not comfortable at all. And ultimately I was doing that because I didn't like myself. Yeah, it's fair to say that I really didn't like myself. During that time I was looking in mirrors and absolutely hating what I'd seen, what I was seeing in the mirror. And I remember taking some object from the room and just smashing the mirror, because all of these feelings of hatred, I was like, oh, I just don't like you. I was feeling like I was ugly, like I was broken, like I was dirty, all of these things. I was feeling ashamed, and I didn't understand where all of these feelings were coming from. They were coming up like such big surges. I remember just smashing this mirror, and all of the little bits of glass like fractured and splintered. And I remember seeing a bit of me in each, like, you know, a bit of an eyeball there and an ear there. And it was strangely comforting, because what I was seeing back for the first time reflected how I actually felt inside. It was like, I feel fractured, I feel broken. And this is a kind of external way of showing that. So that was oddly calming. And so over the course of the next couple of years, 16 to 18, I went downhill quite rapidly. I was desperately trying to keep up this persona of being all right on the outside, but I just felt like I was dying on the inside. And I remember my relationship just was getting harder and harder. We actually got engaged during this time to be married, but the relationship was never going to be sustainable. We both had a lot in our backgrounds, and I had a lot that I didn't understand about myself, and I was acting in ways that I couldn't really believe that I was. You know, I didn't feel like me. I didn't feel like me. I felt like I was splitting into these two people. And ultimately we broke up. The relationship didn't survive. And it was actually really sad when we broke up, because he said to me, he left me and he said, I love you so much, and I feel that me being with you is hurting you. Because I was self-harming more and more, and the more that we tried to have sex and intimacy, the more I was being triggered into my stuff, and the more I'd self-harm. And so I get it, from his point of view, he's thinking, oh God, just me being in relationship with you is putting pressure on you and making you feel all of these feelings, and I want you to be all right and safe, so I'm going to go. The problem is, when somebody says that to you, it's incredibly hard to get over. It's not like saying, I hate you, I don't want to be with you. It's like, I love you so much, I'm hurting you, but I want to leave to keep you safe. I couldn't really get my head around that then. I remember feeling angry and hurt and abandoned and feeling like, but if you love me, you would stay. But I wasn't really able to look at the bigger picture at that time. And I really spiraled then. And I started getting into just smoking weed. And I was certainly drinking a lot by then. I was drinking a lot of whiskey. And I remember going to a doctor and deciding to be brave and say, because by this point I had been having lots of night terrors. I'd been calling out in the night. I was dreaming that I'd been raped. I was starting to have daily daytime flashbacks as well. Just, you know, nothing massive, but sorry, the effect was massive, but I wasn't having like these huge big memories. I was having like fragments, which I'm sure you might be able to relate to, fragments of a visual snip of a memory, or you hear something, or you smell a smell, you know, and you're taken back there in these little fragments. And I had this ever-growing sense like, oh my God, that there's something awful that's happened. I can feel there's something awful that's happened to me, and I know what it is, but I don't want to look at it. I cannot look at it, because if I accept that, then reality is broken for me, it felt like. And I just couldn't do it. And anyway, so I went to the doctor, because at this point I was quite worried for my safety. I was getting erratic and out of control with the self-harm, and I was drinking and taking drugs. And anyway, I went to the doctor, and it took a lot of courage to stand there and to say, I was shaking. I remember I had gone in and I was like clawing at my hands, so they were like all scratched up and stuff from where I was just so nervous about what I was going to say. And I told him about everything that had been happening with me. I told him about the vaginismus. I told him about the dreams. I told him about the flashbacks. And I managed to say for the first time, I'm really scared because I think that I was raped and I'm remembering it. And I'll never forget his response, which was terrible. He said to me, you girls reading your magazine stories, you shouldn't believe what you read in those stories. Stuff like this doesn't happen in real life. All you need to do is, if you want to have sex, just use a little bit more lube, you'll be fine. I mean, I was speechless. I was stood there like shaking, because for the first time I had voiced this. And I had been shut down. I had not been believed. I'd been made out to be stupid and immature with these magazines that I'm supposed to have read. It belittled everything about this whole journey with the vaginismus that I had been on, where, you know, my body was responding to severe extreme trauma. Like, primary vaginismus does not happen for no reason, you know. And I've been on this journey for the last 2 years with my partner, and I spiraled into depression, anxiety. I was having flashbacks. I was having panic attacks. I was having dissociations where I was outside of my body. I couldn't sleep, having nightmares when I did. I felt like I wasn't a woman. I was worried that I'd never be able to have kids, never be able to have a family. It broke my relationship with the person who I was in love with, who I was going to get married to. And so I've got the wealth of all of this behind me. And he's just belittled it to use more lube. I cannot explain to you how I felt on that day. Like, my stomach had fallen out from under me. I felt like I was shooting down through the floor, like I couldn't stay in my body. I don't really remember how I left the doctor's surgery. That is a blur still. But I do remember that I left there and I immediately tried to commit suicide, because that's the effects that it had had on me. Yeah, so woke up in hospital, and do you know, at this point as well, I so just had enough, and living at this point was so tiring. Every day trying to show up, feeling like I'm pulling in half and breaking into these two different people, the happy one I present myself in and the depressed one that was secretly underneath. That I was so angry when I woke up in hospital. It was like pulling the tubes out of me, saying, how dare you take away my human right to die? You know, I didn't ask for you to save me. I didn't ask for you to be putting these things into me. Obviously now, years later, I'm very grateful. I'm very, very grateful. And I am so happy to be alive, and I love my life, and I love what I do. And I'm so very, very grateful to everything that's happened in my life that meant that I was able to recover and to heal and to learn to really love and accept myself at the core of who I am. But at the time, it wasn't what I wanted at all. I think that's quite sad, actually, to look back on, that I was in that much of a place where it was just devastating to me to wake up and to be alive. And then the next thing that happened, I mean, I continued to just spiral downhill after that point. I was taking a lot more drink and drugs. I was nearly always drunk. On the more positive side of me, the positive Heather, by this time I was splitting into like Hev and Heather, these two different people, which is quite worrying. But the positive one had decided to go on a backpacking trip with my friend from Germany. So I went over to Germany first, and then we went backpacking all over America. So we started off on the East Coast and went to all these different places and ended up on the West Coast, and then came back again over the course of a few months. And I was 18 at this point, and I mean, there's a whole long story that I won't go into the whole story now, because this video is going to be so long. But whilst I was in America, I was gang raped by 6 people in a hotel room in Las Vegas. And I mean, that was like the final straw for me. How I got into that situation in the first place was one where I trusted somebody. And looking back, I was probably quite blind on who to trust and who not to trust because of my childhood experiences. Trust was very muddled for me. But I remember this guy who I trusted. He said to me, he looked at my cuts on my arm, and he showed me his, and he said, "Oh, you're the same, you and me." And I really felt like, oh, he understands me. And I allowed myself to feel like I was safe, feel like I'd been seen, been heard. And, you know, that's why it was so devastating that actually he led me into this situation with these 6 people. And I remember when I was in it, because they drugged me, they forced the pipe and lighting it, and they like held my nose, and they literally forced me to take it. At knife point, they had a knife in my side the whole time. And so with what I was smoking, I was incredibly limp. I couldn't do anything to protect myself. And I remember all through it, I was kind of observing myself, observing this whole scene happening. And I was drifting in and out of consciousness as well. But when I was with it, I remember desperately thinking, like, you have to remember what's happening right now. But at the same time as that, I was watching myself and watching the whole scene. And it was so unbelievably scary, and so to not have any control, to not have any power. And, you know, with all of these strong men, you know, what could I have done anyway? And of course, on a subconscious level, it's bringing up all of this childhood trauma. I'm just like reliving it. But when this finished, and when I was at a point of safety again, I didn't tell anybody what had happened for 15 years, because I was so afraid. Like, I've been, I was already a therapist by the point where I actually decided to speak out about this. It's how deeply it affected me, how I just knew I could never say. And I know they had made threats, like, if you ever tell anyone, I'll kill you, and things like that, which you take very seriously when someone's holding a knife in your side. But I think it was more than that. I think it was all of this secrecy from childhood. I had been conditioned to keep things like this secret, to not speak out about it and to not say. And it was ripping me in half. And so when I eventually came back from the trip and everyone asked me, hey, how was it? I went even more into my hippie happy Heather. I was, oh, it was amazing. It was great. We did this, we did that. Oh, I met all these people. And, you know, a lot of those things that I was talking about were still true. It was a long trip, you know, a lot of good stuff did happen, but I just buried it. I just shoved it down as deep as I possibly could so that I didn't have to think about it. But of course, when I got back, I ended up really splitting into two then, and I ended up doing things that I wasn't even aware of. So, like, for example, one time I remember, so I'd have like these blackouts, but I was still walking around and stuff. So I wasn't unconscious. I just couldn't remember what I had done. I'd slip into being a different personality and then I'd slip back. And I remember one time coming to, as it were, coming back and being in my present body. And the police were there. I was saying to my flatmate, well, what are the police doing here? What's going on? And I said, well, we brought you home because you were trying to climb over a building, a high-rise building in Bristol, and you were trying to kill yourself. So we've brought you home. I had no memory of that. Like, no memory of that. To this day, I have no memory of that. So things like this were happening a lot. Another time I found myself locked in my bedroom and I get snapped out of it and I came to myself. And when I came to, I was covered in blood from where I had been cutting myself, and I had the knife lifted up and pointing between my legs. I hadn't done anything, but I was lifting the knife, and I snapped out of it and came to and threw the knife across the room and thought, what's happened? What's happened? Like, have I been attacked? And it's so scary to realize I was the only person in that room. So the person who was trying to attack me was actually me. And I'm only telling you this not to scare you, but just to tell you that I actually do understand how desperate a situation can get when you have all of these problems, when you have been abused in such a way, and you've been through these traumas in such a way where they are not dealt with. They are not, the thing is with the trauma, it never gets completed in your mind. It gets stored as a trauma, so it's live and it's open, and so it leads to lots of triggerings. And I didn't know any of this. I just knew how terrible I felt, and I felt like I was breaking into two people. And you know, it's taken a lot of work and a lot of time to actually put myself back together again, to learn to love and accept myself, like all parts of me. And back then, I mean, this is a very long time ago that I'm talking about now, and I remember it had got so bad, and I had tried committing suicide a few more times by this point. And then in my early 20s, I was taking a lot of drugs at this point as well. In fact, I was so afraid of starting the day in case I became like this other person that I would instantly take something so that I knew that I could still be like me and that I wasn't going to die, because the other part of me was trying to commit suicide, and there was a part of me that didn't want to die. It's very difficult to explain what that period of my life was like, but it was dark and it was incredibly lonely and full of fear everywhere. And then one day, a family friend had heard, I think I'd been in hospital with a suicide attempt, and he had heard about this, and he was a therapist. He did hypnotherapy, EFT and NLP at that time, which are 3 of the therapies that I use today because I stand by them so much. And he offered to help me. And I had never met him before. I didn't know him, but I was living in, by this point I'd moved back to Yates near Bristol, and he was living in Weston-super-Mare. And he came and picked me up and took me to therapy and dropped me back, and it was a long process. Like at the beginning, nothing happened overnight, because by this stage I hated myself. I was terrified of everyone and everything. I'd become quite paranoid as well, actually. I was making poor life decisions. And the thing is as well, I'd forgotten to mention that at this stage I still had vaginismus, but I was also incredibly promiscuous. So I was having like sexual encounters with so many people. I mean, I couldn't even tell you how many people, everywhere and everyone. And every time I would do that, I would feel like, oh yeah, I'm not a woman, I'm broken. And I just felt like an absolute mess. And I'd just drink and drink and drink just to try to stay, just to try to feel something. And anyway, and I had been, before this guy said that he would help me, I had actually been referred to the alcohol and drugs place in Bristol, and they said they couldn't take me because of my mental health. And I was referred to the mental health hospital, Blackberry Hill, and they said they couldn't take me until I had done the drug and alcohol. And so, you know, they're both saying you have to go to the other person first or we can't treat you. And that seemed to be the story of my life. I kept asking for help and everyone kept saying, oh no, we'll pass you on to somebody else. I'd even been on the waiting list for a psychosexual counsellor for a very long time. And when it finally came through, I was really anxious. And I got in there and I finally thought, oh, this is the person that's going to help me overcome vaginismus. And she took one look at me. I was like having a panic attack by the time I got in there, because she's about 20 minutes late and I was in a very anxious state at that time. She took one look at me and said, is this just because, you know, I'm a few minutes late? Are you in this state? She went, oh no, I can't treat you. I need you to go and have an immediate assessment now at the hospital. And so again, it just felt like everyone was saying, no, 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 can't help you, can't help you. So when this guy did and said, I'm going to help you and I'm going to help you for free. And I didn't really even trust it at first, but I sort of said, oh yeah, okay, I do want to get better. And I had therapy with him for about 3 years. And I mean, my life, wow, my life totally changed in those 3 years. Unrecognizable from what it was. I was unrecognizable from who I was. Nothing happened immediately overnight, because I had forgotten to say as well, by this stage, I was really not eating. And I went down to 6 stone. I mean, that's less than half what I am now. I'm really tall. And 6, I mean, you could see every rib, you know, I was not healthy. I wasn't eating. And so I think he was aware, like, oh, this is a delicate situation here. This is somebody who really is not well right now. And so we took it very, very gently. And I explained to him about this whole being referred on all the time and having to come off substances before I could have therapy. And I told him, like, thank you for doing this, but I will not come off drink and I will not come off drugs. I'll come off the class A's and everything, but I will not stop smoking weed because I need it. At that stage, my belief system was I need this to stay alive, and there was nobody going to take that away from me. And his response was, oh, brilliant. I wouldn't expect you to take it away. I wouldn't expect to take that away from you if it's helping you. And it was the first time that I thought, oh, someone's actually listening to me. And I don't have to squeeze and fit into their mold of how they feel I should be if I'm going to embark on therapy. I really got the feeling like he will create the therapy around me and where I am at. And this is exactly what I do with my clients. I don't believe in squishing you into a mold at all. You're a unique, wonderful, amazing individual person with your own set of experiences and your own set of how you respond to those experiences now. And that's a wonderful, unique thing to be celebrated. And I learned a lot from this guy who was my therapist. And a lot of it stays really with me in my heart. I'm so grateful to him because he is the reason that I'm alive today. He's the reason that I became a therapist. And I'm also so grateful to myself as well, because, you know, I could go along to a therapist, but if I didn't do the work, if I didn't choose to say yes, if I didn't do the homework that he was setting me, if I didn't reevaluate my beliefs, if I didn't choose to say no to that drink, if I had made different decisions, then I wouldn't be here. So I'm not saying, oh, I went to a therapist and he fixed me. I don't believe in that. I believe that a therapist is a facilitator and creates the space for you to heal and grow, and has the tools and facilities. But ultimately, I did that work. I dug deep, deep, deep inside myself, and I found that I am a strong person. You know, I found my courage to turn up each time. After a little while, because he used to come and pick me up, but after a while, because my anxiety was reducing and I was feeling more confident, I remember telling him that I was going to get the bus, and that was a big day. Deciding that I was going to empower myself actually by making a choice to get on the bus and go to therapy. There were so many good days, and I remember quite early, I would say within the first few months of therapy, I was feeling so much better about myself that I decided, hang on, I don't want to be drinking actually. I remember going home one day and just pouring them all away, and how empowering that was to do that. And choosing health, choosing vibrancy, choosing joy, choosing my own life, you know, choosing me. And so things like that would happen. So I stopped drinking, and then I decided to stop smoking weed, and and I gave up normal cigarettes as well, because I was on like 60 a day or something. So because I wasn't sleeping at night, so I was smoking a lot. And I started sleeping again, and my life was just transforming around me. And one of the therapies that he did with me is one that I do with you. It's called emotional freedom technique, and a part of that is that you say this phrase: even though I have such and such a problem, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Now, we don't always have to say that. If you're coming to me for therapy, we change it around. We say what you're comfortable with. However, I remember, this is, I don't know, 20 years ago or whatever, he said this to me. He wanted me to repeat after him: even though I feel blah, 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 I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And I remember looking at him and said, are you having a laugh? I said to him, I hate myself. I despise who I am. I'm not going to say that. And I don't know, I can't remember how much time it took in therapy. I don't know, but I do remember the day. It was a sunny day. I remember that. And we were sitting in the conservatory. That's it. He did his sessions from the conservatory of his house in Weston. I remember the sun was shining. And he said, do you want to repeat after me? And I said, even though I feel blah, 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 I deeply and completely, and then I was stuck for ages. I was like, la, 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 la. Do I, can I dare say it? And I remember saying, I love and accept myself. And you know what? I meant it. I meant it with everything that I am. I meant it from the bottom of my heart. It was like I was suddenly a best friend to all of the various parts in me, to my child self, to my teenage self, to all. I actually accepted myself. It's like, this is who I am. I accept who I am, and I love who I am. And it was so astounding to me. It was like, I do. I love myself. Oh my God, I love myself. I love myself. It was a pivotal day for me. That I remember it was sunny, and I remember when I left that day, I was walking, and I remember looking down at the grass, and it was like the grass was made out of diamonds. It was like everything was shining. It was like I was seeing the world for the first time. Instead of through my dark blinkers, I was really seeing it in Technicolor. I looked up at the sky. It was a blue sky. It had some clouds in it, and it was like glitter falling from the sky. It was like everything was shimmery. Everything was alive. Everything was so beautiful. And I felt myself expansive and free, and I had so much hope. And I knew in that moment that anything was possible. And I'm not saying that everybody will have the same experience that I've had. We are all totally unique individuals. But for me, this was an exceptional day. It really was an exceptional day. And I mean, it still moves me now to remember that. And it was so long ago. But after that, my life really changed. I became healthy, looking after myself. Like, my weight went up to a healthy, normal weight. I got a job. I was having better relationships with people, friendships. I was making decisions that were in alignment with me taking care of myself. Because, you know, we say, don't we, oh, I love myself. And it's like there's quite a lot of hype around loving yourself. But actually, what does that mean? To me, it's like being a best friend to yourself. You know, how would you treat your best friend? Treat yourself that way. And that's what I was doing to myself. I was nurturing myself, looking after myself, doing little things that made me happy. I was doing a lot of walking outside. And I was drawn to certain things. Like, I saw this painting in a shop at like a secondhand place. And I'd walked across the fields 3 miles to this place, and I saw it, and they said, oh, it'd be £10. So I walked back across the fields to the cash point, get the £10 out, walked back, went and picked it up, and then took it back with me. So I was doing things like that. I felt like I was in resonance with certain things because this picture really just spoke to me in an emotional way. And I went home and hung it above my piano. So every time I kind of played piano and was in an emotional state, I could tune in. Whereas before, I think the difference would have been like, I'm not going to get that, I don't deserve it. So I was undergoing this radical change in my life. I was learning who I was, and I completely healed the split between Heather and Heath. Like, these two parts of me, they just didn't need to be healed anymore, didn't need to be split anymore. As whilst I was going through all this therapy, I was working on my own childhood sexual abuse. I didn't even tell this therapist actually about what happened in Las Vegas. He doesn't know to this day, actually, unless he sees this video. But yeah, so during that time, I was working on deep, difficult emotions from the past. I learned how to sleep again, and I stopped having flashbacks, and I stopped having these huge panic PTSD responses of falling on the floor and zooming out of my body. Do you know what it was? It was safe for me to be in my body. As I came to terms with my past, as I started to accept, this is reality, this is true. Can I give myself permission to really know that this happened, and it's safe for me to know that it happened. Nothing bad is going to happen if I say, yes, this did happen. And the whole thing has been such a journey. I mean, I could go into every little bit, but we'll be here forever. But there have been certain highlights, you know, in my life. So shortly after, when I finished my 3 years of therapy, I was so, oh my God, I just loved all of these different techniques. I loved how I transformed and changed so much as a person that I wanted to help other people do the same thing. So I trained in hypnotherapy, NLP, and EFT, which are the three that had helped me. And I've since trained in a lot of other therapies as well. And I use a mix of them all together. But even, when was it? It was probably about 6 or 7 years ago was the first time that I spoke out about what happened in Las Vegas, and I did my therapy on that. And it was always my fear of, one of my biggest fears was always I could never tell my family what's happened. And I always felt like I was separate from my family. So at family dues and big occasions, I always felt like I needed to put on a brave face. I needed to just be happy or be silly or be whoever they wanted to be, so long as they didn't look inside and see who I really was. Which is weird because I actually really like my family and I like hanging out with them, but there was this part of me that I kept locked away. And it was probably about 4 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, actually, I think, that I decided to tell them. It was when we all went into lockdown for the first time, and I felt like I'm safe, I'm in lockdown, so this is the time that I'm gonna tell the family. And I actually decided to do it in the form of a letter that I then emailed out rather than go face to face. And there's no rights or wrong ways of doing this at all, but for me, I felt like I wanted to tell everyone at once. And I wrote this really kind of an empowering letter, actually. I wrote a few drafts of it before I actually sent it, but I was so pleased with what I wrote because it's something I'd been so frightened of doing for so long. And at times I had told a few people in the past and they hadn't believed me. Or they said, oh, you have heard of false memories, haven't you? And I thought, oh, yes, but you haven't lived my life. You don't know what I've been through. And so I didn't want those kind of responses. And so, because I knew the truth, I can stand in my own truth. And so I wrote the letter in such a way that was compassionate, but also very much standing in my own power and just saying, you know, this is me telling you what's happened, and I only expect to have compassionate responses, or something like that. I mean, that's not exactly what I said, but the way that I wrote it was very self-loving, self-caring, and it was also caring towards those people as well. And I offered that if anyone wanted to talk, that, you know, my door is open for that. And that was such a big thing for me to do. I remember once I'd done it and I'd written this letter. I was living on the Isle of Wight at the time, and I sent the letter out, and I got some responses back that they were all a few lines each, positive responses saying, well done for speaking out about this. And it was the kind of responses that I'd always really wanted, just to be believed, you know. And I remember going down to the seafront at Ryde where I lived, and just the sun was setting and it was all like purple and orange across the sky, and I was just crying and crying these such happy tears, like, oh my God, I got it out of me. I finally said, and the world didn't end. You know, the world hasn't stopped turning, reality hasn't snapped. You know, I'm still alive and breathing. The sea is still rolling in and out, and that sky still looks incredible. And I rang my best friend at the time and was just like crying down the phone to him, like, I've done it, I've done it. And he'd been on this journey with me. And oh, it's just incredible. And since then, I've had conversations with people, and it's become more of a normal thing. And now, obviously, I have been working as a therapist for the last 10 years, and I have worked predominantly with people who have experienced sexual abuse, although I've worked with all kinds of other traumas as well. But it's really nice now. I've moved back to Bristol and I'm setting up Bristol Trauma Therapy, it feels really right now. I feel like I can finally speak out about my experiences in a way that can help other people without having to keep anything secret. You know, when these things happen to us as children, it is not our job to keep the secret. I know sometimes we want to, and it's up to you how much you say. There's plenty of things that I haven't disclosed, but I find that it's quite empowering just to say I was sexually abused, because that's the truth. It's out there, and it's really hard to keep those things into yourself. Like, who do I tell? Who do I not tell? Or and having to keep track of, like, who have I told something to and who haven't I, and how much do people actually know me? And I'm not suggesting for a second, if you're watching this video and you've experienced sexual abuse of any kind and you don't want to tell anyone, please, I totally respect that. I'm not saying that my way is the right way for anyone else. I'm just saying, for me, it has been a liberating experience to go through that part of my journey. But I tell you, the first time that I tried to talk about it in a therapy session, words would not come out of my mouth. They got stuck in my throat. I could not speak. And so I do understand how hard it is. And when I started, I actually had this board that I drew with letters on, and I would point to the letters and I would spell out words to the therapist, because I could not voice what had happened. And I totally get that. And that's why, you know, now, me being a therapist, because I know so much from my own journey and so much from all the clients that I've worked with, I've adapted things so many times now to go with the flow, to really tune in to what you need in that moment, so that we can work together in a way that feels completely safe, where you're in control at all times. And we can take it right back to basics and slow it down, like with that board that I was talking about. And I can now look back, and although, you know, I don't like what happens to me, I wouldn't be me without it. And I really love who I am. Like, you know, I don't want to sound big-headed or anything, but I'm a really nice person. Like, I catch sight of myself in the mirror now and I'm like, I am. I really like who I am. If I met me, I would want to be my friend. Like, isn't that a lovely thing to be able to say about yourself? And so I like myself so much now. I love myself. I love what I do for work. I love my friends and my family. And in coming to terms with all the traumas that I've been through, and there haven't been time to tell you about all of them actually, because there were others, but in coming to terms with all the traumas that I've been through and accepting and integrating them into part of who I am as a whole, and still standing in my own power and speaking my truth, I wouldn't want to change a thing. Because without having had those experiences in the past, I wouldn't be here able to help you. And there have been people that have been ahead of me on my journey that have inspired me to speak out, that have inspired me to continue on my journey, even when it has been so hard. And now I feel really authentic. I feel like I can stand authentically in my truth and in my power. I feel like I can speak my truth with love. You know, I have compassion for myself. I even have compassion for the people who were involved. Because I know, and this might be hard for you to hear, and I'm not saying that you need to feel or think this way at all, but just for me on my own journey, hurt people. Like, that's a fact. And I was so hurt, and I was so afraid for a long time over things that had happened to me in the past. And the truth is, those people would never have hurt me if they weren't hurting themselves. It just wouldn't have happened. If those people loved and accepted themselves for who they were in the way that I do now, there would never have been any desire to hurt anyone else, especially not a little child. And so parts of my journey have involved thinking about how I feel about my abusers, what might have been going on for them at the time. And, you know, I like to do this little exercise sometimes for me, of seeing my abusers, but shrinking them down to being a child, just a little child themselves. And what have they been through to make them that way in the first place? And I find that I'm able to have compassion at that point, and forgiveness. And I know that forgiveness isn't for everybody. I know that. But I also know how kind of liberating and free it can feel, because you're no longer attached to the outcome of that anymore. You're just not. It's like I have given myself permission to just simply be myself now. Whereas if I'm still holding on to anger or hatred or hurt, I'm keeping that link alive between us, and I'm continuing to feed that into me. They say, don't they, that I don't know who said this quote, but that holding on to anger for somebody is like pouring out a glass of poison for somebody else, but drinking it yourself. And I do agree with that, because in all the years that I hadn't forgiven, and that I didn't have compassion for these people, I was hurting myself by holding on to that. And now that I've let go of it, I don't really find myself thinking about it anymore. I'm kind of too busy with my present day life and kind of hopes and dreams for the future. Whereas before, I couldn't not think about it. Everything was triggering me. Everything was taking me back to the past. I had to keep revisiting it all the time. But I think I'm a testament to good therapy and how you really can transform your life. You can reclaim your life after trauma, after sexual abuse, after childhood sexual abuse. You can reclaim your life. I have reclaimed mine. Oh, and I forgot to tell you as well, I told you about vaginismus at the beginning. Yeah, when I was having my therapy and everything years ago, I totally have overcome vaginismus and could enjoy loving sex. For a while, I was, I still didn't have the best relationship with my body, so I could have sex, like kind of wild, porn style sex, or I could be loving and intimate without sex. But that was a sort of a transitionary period whilst I was still working through things. And it wasn't long before I could make love, before I could be really vulnerable and intimate with somebody, in every way, learning to feel pleasure in my own body, learning to ask for what I want, learning to feel safe in my body, and to explore intimate connections. In so many ways, intimacy and trust on a physical level, but also emotionally and mentally and spiritually, energetically. I know that if you have experienced any of these things that we've been talking about in these traumas, and they are affecting you on a physiological level in your body, you can release the trauma from your body. You can. I have. There's a thing called like somatic release. I've had animals in the wild, they don't store trauma in their body. When they've been in a traumatic situation and then they're at a point of safety, they actually just shake for 30 seconds and they release the trauma from their body and they go about their day. But human beings and domesticated animals like cats and dogs have been conditioned in such a way that we hold on to our trauma. And then we get things like PTSD and flashbacks and stuff. But what happens often in the therapy that I do is that when we're working on a memory, for example, when you're ready to do that, when working on a memory, we can actually, we go into this 30-second shake where we release it on a somatic level like wild animals do. So it's no longer held in the cells of our body anymore. And that is the most incredible gift and the incredible release that you can give yourself. Because at that point, the memory, which I think I touched on it earlier by saying, when you have a traumatic memory and you go into a freeze response, when you can't do fight or flight and you freeze, the memory never gets finished. It gets frozen at that point and it's left open. So when you have PTSD, you're always being taken back to it. Whereas whether you're visually seeing it or just feeling it as a bodily thing. Whereas in these therapies that I do, we complete and we close the memory. So they're filed away. So they're not left open anymore for these PTSD responses to happen. And it really, really does give you freedom and liberation. And that's exactly what has happened with me. And as a result of that, I have found myself living more and more and more in the present, and so will you. So thank you very much for listening to this video. I know it's been quite long. Can't actually see how long it is, but thank you for letting me share my story with you. Obviously, there's so much more to say. I know there is, but you know, there's only so much time and space. If you would like to connect with me, if you want to talk to me about anything that I've said in this video, or if you would like to ask any questions about your own journey and how I might be able to help you in your own healing and recovery, please do get in contact. My phone number is on the website, 07824 394 379, or drop me an email at heather@bristoltraumatherapy.co.uk, or fill in the form on my website. I'd love to hear from you, and I always give a free chat over Zoom. So if you wanted to have a free 15-minute chat about anything, there's no obligation to start therapy with me at all. You just come and have a chat and we'll see if we're a good fit for each other or not, with no expectations. Alternatively, if you feel like things that I've said resonate, if you feel like you maybe do resonate with my energy and you'd like to try having a session, my first sessions are always only £30. So you could come along to an in-person session in Bristol in BS3, or you can have an online Zoom session, and it'll only cost £30. And that will give you a lot more insight into what we do together and whether you might like to continue with your journey. Okay. Oh, right. So take care of yourselves, and I look forward to hearing from you if that feels right. And thank you once again for listening to me. Take care for now. Bye.